Everything is not as it seems.
All right, kids, welcome back to another episode of the Shape of Things to Come podcast. I am your host, as per usual, Shape. It is like a fucking 100 degrees out in Brooklyn today. It is hot. It is uncomfortable. It is oppressive. It is, whew. And you know what the worst part about it is? It's having to walk around the streets and see all the amazing, beautiful, suicide girl looking tattooed vixens just prancing around scantily clad. It is like watching pornography with your hands tied behind your back. I literally got off the subway and I walked for about 4 blocks behind this amazing, I gotta tell you, amazing looking girl. Now I don't know if this is just me. Like, if I have some kind of weird sexually repressed frustration that causes me to want to punch fucking brick walls when I see hot girls. That's like my inclination. I see a hot girl, I don't think I should hit on that. I should go holler at this chick. Girl, what you doing? What's your name? That is not me. I see a hot girl, and the first thing I think is I feel this little sense of inadequacy. And then I bite my lower lip until it bleeds, and I want to punch through bulletproof glass. I want to fucking Hulk smash a building. I go, Urgh! And I was walking behind this girl, and I'm going to be honest, I was checking out her ass. It was a goddamn amazing ass. If I was driving in a car, I would have gotten in an accident looking at that ass, because it was fucking spectacular. And I was holding my cell phone in my hand the whole time, and I was like squeezing my cell phone, and the only instinct that I had was just to chuck my cell phone at the back of her head. What is that? Why would I, that was my thought. This chick is so hot, I want to do a fucking reach back behind my fucking shoulder and chuck a cell phone at her head for being so goddamn hot. Maybe I'm a crazy person. I think I might be. For even talking about this. Anyway, it's been a while. I haven't been putting out the podcast as regularly. Real life gets in the way. I have a full-time job. I've got a shitty ex-girlfriend that I'm dealing with. I'm trying to make music of my own. You know, the whole point is I'm trying to, give everyone an insight into how other people's artistic minds work. But I also have an artistic mind, and I'm trying to do the best I can with my artistic mind. And there's a lot of setbacks, and I do what I can. I don't get these side projects out as regularly as I should, but fuck it. The last one was the crazy drunken conversation I had with the Slang Corp gang, and hopefully you enjoyed that one. If that was the first one you came into, I don't imagine you're listening to this one now, because it was a confusing hodgepodge of drunken madness. But this one in particular is pretty good. Billy Wood stopped by, who was a fucking awesome MC. I got in touch with him because I'd heard some of his music through AM Breakups in the cast over at Reservoir Sound, who are our mutual friend. Is how I got in touch there. And I hit up Billy Woods about doing the interview, and he stopped by and he sent me his new album in advance to check out for the interview. And man, I listened to it and it's fucking awesome. Everything I'd heard before that, I loved it, but to listen to his cohesive album, the album's called History Will Absolve Me, and it's fucking great. And we sat down and had a great conversation, and he was a really cool dude. He's got a lot to say, and I was into every fucking second of it. I don't really have much more to go on as far as introductions go. You can follow me on Twitter at shape1.com. No, I can never. Follow me on Twitter at shape1. There's no .com. It's just at shape1. I'm still learning Twitter. I'm gonna have to really learn Twitter. I have the Facebook page up for the podcast, but I'm after this month, I'm getting rid of Facebook. I'm sick of it. I'll talk about that more in another introduction, but I am just fucking sick of Facebook. It's turning into MySpace, and I want nothing to do with it anymore. It is, it's a corporate whorehouse over there that I can't condone, and I don't want any part of it. But that's not here or there. I want to just get into this quickly. I always say I want to get into it quickly, and then I keep going on and ranting. we talk exclusively about his album, but we really focus on 2 songs about the album that I'm gonna play to bookend the interview. So I think the first one I'll play is "The Man Who Would Be King," and we end up talking in depth about that song. Really, and it's really interesting because Billy Woods is a really a literate artist, I want to say. Talking to him, I was impressed. This dude was using SAT words on me, which is not something you always get talking to rappers. So it was refreshing, and it was intellectually stimulating, and his music is the same way. And I recommend that anyone goes and checks him out because I'm backing this dude 100%. His shit is awesome. So we'll play "The Man Who Would Be King," and then I'll close out with the next song that we get into a little bit in the interview. So when the interview's over, we'll end with the song called "Blue Dream," which is also a really awesome song. And it's cool because these are the 2 songs on the album that I heard that really stood out to me. Not that every other track didn't stand out to me; they were all fucking awesome. These 2 songs I really just personally enjoyed quite a bit. Check out the interview, and next week I'm gonna be dropping "The Man from Somewhere Else" one, which I know a few people have been asking to hear. So shit. Fucking enjoy, baby.
Mogambo, the new word in motion picture entertainment. Mogambo, unforgettable adventure in untamed Africa. Africa, known for centuries as the white man's graveyard. The heat and fury of the jungle tears the veneer of civilization from these women. No holds are barred as they fall in love with a man who lives for adventure.
Facing existential threats, my advice: kill him dead, no regrets. The devil's rejects, writ large. Observe the precepts of a benevolent God. Blue-eyed Prometheans in the heart of darkness, land of the monsters. Walk like Quetzalcoatl amongst the conquered. Dig hard, put myself in the stars. His woman in the dirt, face down, ass up, doing God's work. Go native, the world is yours. The sound of Maxim's gun still sends a chill up my spine. Empire of the sun never sets. A Christian's duty is never done. You can bet on significant returns to all shareholders. King Solomon's mines, just give me 100 experienced soldiers. The knowledge of good and evil, sweet nothings whispered by cobras. Useless baubles given to greedy chiefs. Lies told with the practiced ease of an old thief. When they hung the poor nigga, I felt a certain relief.
A time for discretion, Fowler. Think I'm gonna run out of bullets before they run out of spears.
Take up your burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought. Watch sloth and heathen folly bring all your hopes to naught. Gold ill-gotten with guts and gleaming Martin Henry guns. With that holy trinity, who can argue my divinity under 2 red suns? Return like Kipling's dead son, summoned by monkey paw. 1,000 Philistines slain with the donkey's jaw. Gave them the rule of law. Schools, roads, jobs, clothes, and shod. Still, they fled to the land of Nod. Eden's east, upon his brow, mark of the beast. Empire fat like a cow, slaughtered for the feast. The stink of a jackal's teeth. The gears of war get greased, ground him down to raw meat. Whites of the eyes, limpid minds, an apartheid of the mind. Britannia's corpse exhumed, hair and nails still growing. Dr. Livingston, I presume, blood rivers still flowing. The forest inexorably growing as Kinshasa crumbles. The dreams of Romans drowned out by Nair Gongo's rumble.
They're friendly, how nice.
Sure could have fooled me.
Take up your burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought. Watch sloth and heathen folly bring all your hopes to naught.
Did you see his necklace?
Yeah, a little pretentious for my taste.
You travel along uncharted waterways on a suspenseful safari. You venture across the African veldt, alive with all manner of wild beasts. The blood-chilling spectacle, the battle of the gorillas. Photographed for the first time.
kind of been in New York, I guess, my whole life,
okay.
but in different ways. My mother is from Jamaica, father was from Zimbabwe, and they met in the U.S. because my father was kind of in exile because Zimbabwe was called Rhodesia and it had a significant white population that had...
yeah, it was a British colony?
Yeah, and then the white settlers rejected any idea of integration and declared independence. You know, then a civil war broke out in which my father was on the side of the guerrilla movement, a specific guerrilla movement.
Okay, yeah, because it was like, so it wasn't necessarily a civil war, because it was, well, I guess it kind of is if it's...
Yeah, I mean, you could, depending on how you want to look at it, it was either a war of independence or it was a civil war, or maybe both.
Yeah, okay.
Because the white people who were there's argument was that they broke away from England.
Right.
You know, or attempted to.
Yeah, and England never recognized them as
an independent country.
State, right. Yeah.
And in reality, their independent status only lasted a little more than a decade. And so we lived in Washington, D.C., and just outside of there in Prince George's County when I was a little kid. And then when the war was won, my father had been involved from a political standpoint, and so we all went back there, and I lived in Zimbabwe for about 9 years.
So that was when it wasn't Rhodesia any longer?
No,
and that was right at the beginning of
Zimbabwe, yeah. But my mother being from Jamaica, we would come back to the U.S. all the time and go to Jamaica to visit her family.
Okay.
And also, we would always come to New York to visit all of my aunts and stuff. So I was in New York, you know, sometime almost every year.
Like for a few months visiting and stuff?
Yeah, usually for a few weeks, sometimes longer.
Yeah, where in Jamaica? Was she from like Kingston area? Or?
No, it's a very, very, very rural part of the country. The closest like town is called Giddy Hall. That's not even really a town. It's like a post office and a store.
Right, like that.
The closest like town, city is Black River.
I don't know the geography there, but so it's like kind of out there.
Yeah, it's closer to, you know, Montego Bay, Spanish Town.
So you kind of had...
South Lamar.
That's kind of an interesting perspective then, because going from Jamaica and then being in Zimbabwe, I mean, that's like you're getting a global perspective on things going around the world. They're kind of like politically in different climates and stuff.
It was definitely a formative experience. And equally formative, I think, is that when my father died when we were living there. And so,
in Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then my mother, for a variety of reasons, didn't want to stay there. And we moved back to the U.S. So then I was back in the D.C. area, Maryland, right by the D.C. border. And,
how old were you when you were living in Zimbabwe? Did you like go to school there? Or?
Yeah. 5 until I was 12.
So it was like, I mean, obviously it's a pretty vastly different experience going to school there and going to school in Washington, D.C.
It was completely different, and it was and yeah, so it was both a formative experience moving there, equally formative coming back here.
Right. Was it still like a heavy political climate there at the time? Because I mean, like it was a transitional period.
Yes, for sure. Because South Africa was still under apartheid and was waging like a low-level guerrilla war against its neighbors, and Zimbabwe being probably the most independent, in many ways the biggest threat to South Africa. Because its situation had been so close to South Africa. So the South Africans had kind of, what they wanted to do was turn Zimbabwe into a compliant sort of buffer state and establish maybe the sort of relationship that Israel has with a country like Egypt.
Sure, yeah.
You're not best friends, but they're not going to help anyone do anything against you.
Right.
Stalemate, economic cooperation where necessary.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they wanted. When that wasn't what was happening, they would use force or economic measures.
Right,
because Zimbabwe is a landlocked country. Yeah. They have need of South Africa for certain things. So they would bring military force or economic pressure to bear when the relationship got rocky. So, you know, I remember one time, for example, they blew up these ANC offices that were in Harare because they kept warning Harare not to allow the ANC to have an office there.
The ANC was the
majority. Nelson Mandela.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, because you can see that that's any kind of independence and like black nationalist movement within that region is going to be kind of intimidating to a country like South Africa with their regime.
Yes,
and they had really phase for the whole area, right?
Yeah, I think they really come to a point where they thought that their best bet was. Not unlike, again, and I'm not trying to draw a straight line between Israel and apartheid. although there are obviously many
A lot of
parallels.
similarities, yeah.
One of their goals, I think, was to try and, at a certain point, they accepted this is inevitable. We're not going to be able to keep white-controlled states in our satellite countries. They're just not as strong as us, because South Africa had been independent for much longer and had a lot more military and economic power. So what they wanted to do was create, like I said, like buffer states that they could work with and negotiate with,
Right.
and achieve some sort of a... It wasn't what either side wanted, but everybody would kind of play along. Again, similar to the Israeli situation.
Right.
And so they tried to do that throughout that time period. So it was a threat, and then they also sought to try and co-opt it and control it in certain ways that obviously in the end didn't work. Although in the end it was more about, like it is a lot at the time, the regimes fall apart from the inside.
Yeah, yeah. Even recently, right now, it's not economically. It's in a downturn, right?
Oh, sure.
Have you
Well,
been,
I mean, who isn't?
have you been back?
I haven't been in Zimbabwe since the early 1990s. I'm trying to go this year. We'll see what
You
happens.
still have family out there? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
But obviously Oh, you were talking about Zimbabwe. I thought you were talking about South Africa. No, Zimbabwe's economic and political situation deteriorated very rapidly.
Yeah.
Throughout, during the 1990s, you know, I think the end of the Cold War and the sort of economic changes that happened around the world, and
Yeah.
the choice that then a lot of developing nations, where before they could be like, I'll just say that we're communist and then we'll get money from the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
Now
China.
you have to, that's off.
Yeah.
You have to go to the IMF,
Mm-hmm.
and the IMF is going to be like all of those, you know, various programs popular, and that sort of, you know, top-down state programs
Right.
have to go, and you got to bring in market economies, you got to have austerity, you got to fire people, you got to cut all these subsidies. And so I think Zimbabwe started to flounder somewhat then, and then once there was any sort of agitation against white property rights, which is a big and complicated issue, which
Sure.
we can also discuss. But once that began...
That's been in the news as recently as a few years ago.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's
So
like-
once that started, that's when everything really started, because the West reacted very strongly to that for a variety of reasons. And also it was the beginning of sort of, I think Zimbabweans, after that phase, had really started to, you know, the honeymoon period was long over for the regime, and people were chafing for different directions and new ideas and solutions to the new situation that Zimbabwe found itself in. And I think that ZANU-PF...
ZANU-PF, that's the...
That's the government.
The government, okay, yeah.
While I think that the land reform issue is one that needs to be tackled and needed to be tackled, the state of white... the imbalance, racial imbalance in owning property in Zimbabwe had to be addressed.
Sure.
Both the Mugabe regime and the West erred drastically in how it was addressed. And, you know, now we end up where we are now, which is that the country was in a complete economic freefall, and I guess has now stopped falling and is just laying upon a pile of jagged rocks.
From what I've heard the most, it's kind of like just kind of stabilized out at a...
Yes, it hit an outcropping of jagged rocks, and that's where we're currently lying. So we will see. There's another election not too long from now. But obviously, we could go on forever.
Right. Well, jump into like so after living there until you're like around 12, you were in Washington D.C.
Yeah. So then we came back first to PG County, just stayed with some friends, and my mother got an apartment like the Aspen Hill area of Montgomery County, and stayed there for a year. And then we moved into this little house, and she's been there since, you know. And
okay, so she's still down there?
Yeah, so I went there. She's actually in Jamaica right now, but just visiting. But I went down there. I stayed there pretty much until I graduated from high school.
Okay, so you did all of high school down there?
Yeah,
okay,
some
cool.
of middle school.
Yeah.
It was a huge adjustment, you know, because then I went from just a totally different situation in Zimbabwe. You know, my father was in the government.
He was in the new government?
Yeah, he was in the new government. Because they won the war, and my mother, you know, also had a very good job.
What was your father's role in? So he started off in the guerrilla movement.
Yes, on the political arm of the guerrilla movement.
Right on. Okay.
So he was writing stuff.
Sure.
You know, I guess some of the stuff he was doing now would be actually material support for a terrorist group. You know, like raising money.
Anything. Yeah, okay, yeah.
You know, food drives, money drives, relaying messages, and I mean, who knows what other things were going on.
That's crazy. So at what point did he become an exile to the States?
Well, once he left to, you know, obviously anybody, if you're living under apartheid and you have an opportunity to leave. So my father's parents were very religious. He was not at all. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Marxist. Or maybe Maoist Marxist. But he came here, you know, for educational reasons, obviously. That was basically your only way out of, you know, it wasn't a lot of higher education opportunities except for whites in Rhodesia.
Sure, yeah.
And so his parents were very religious, and through the church that he did not believe in, they did get him a scholarship to start going overseas.
Oh, wow.
And then
so
he
student
just
visa
worked
kind
Both
of
of my parents were great. It's weird because I feel like you say this now and it's like pretentious and weird, but it wasn't really. I just think of it as like describing what they did.
Right.
You know, like their job. Both of my parents were intellectuals. You know?
Sure, yeah.
And they were also really, beyond that, they were like, they came from very deprived third world circumstances or developing world circumstances, and were really good at school and work and had the motivation to work really hard.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like both of my parents piled up many more degrees than I currently hold.
What do they have degrees in?
I'm the regression from
Did you do college or did you
I did go to college.
Yeah.
I have a bachelor's degree.
Okay. What did you study?
Political science and writing.
Sounds about right. When you were in Washington D.C., what kind of area were you living in? Was it like
I lived in it's essentially a suburban area because it's right outside of the actual city of D.C. But if you're familiar with metropolitan Washington D.C., it's like a very small city with one of the bigger metropolitan areas. So like it was an odd mix of things because it was suburban in some ways. It was also very racially mixed.
Okay,
you
so
know what I mean? There were a lot of
it was diverse.
Yeah. Well, PG County is all black. That's the blackest county in the United States.
Okay.
And then Montgomery County is more mixed. So it was the suburbs. Yet I lived next to a subway.
Gotcha.
You know, like I could walk to the DC subway in 10 minutes.
What they call it? The Metro down there?
It's called the Metro. Yeah.
Okay.
So I lived right next to a subway and those sorts of things that make it more. If I had to describe it, it would be more amenable to like Queens or something like that.
Right on.
You know.
So, but yeah.
Like if you lived way out on the edge of Queens or something.
Okay.
Or something like that.
So is that when in high school? Is that when you started doing the hip hop or anything? Or
No. Well, once I got here, it was a big issue, and it's funny because that song "Freedmen's Bureau" is a lot about like what it was like to come back here.
Right.
To that point, you know. Because although I'd been to America a lot, I hadn't actually been living here, and the situation I was coming into was very different than, you know, visiting my cousins in the 80s in New York. You know.
Oh, right. There's probably got to be a culture clash there. It's on some level, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, I visited my cousins in the 80s. They lived in Queens, and then my other aunts lived in Manhattan and B in New York. But it was different because, well, one, it was the 80s, and I was a little kid, and they were a lot older, so I would see them, like, doing stuff or whatever. But it was very different in the fact also that was within my, like, the first generation American, like my cousins were all first generation Americans, you know, Jamaican Americans or whatever.
Right, okay.
I was always within the lens of family, you know, I'm traveling with family. It's not the same as going to school or anything like that.
Deal
you know?
with people from the outside.
Yeah. It was very, very big culture clash. It was very different. But yeah, that song Freedmen's Bureau is kind of talking a lot about how, you know, identity became trying to balance out. The same way when I was in Zimbabwe, funnily enough, people were like, I was really American to them, you know, I wasn't ever a real Zimbabwean. The same way I was never really a real American to like black Americans here. When I first got here, so.
That's almost, I can almost imagine like they're looking at you, I mean, you're getting looked at a little different. Like, you know, like it is like African and African American.
Yeah, no, it was very different. But it was also strange because to me, I had been born here, you know.
That's the Freedmen's Bureau? Is that the song where you're like, just mentioned like cats darker than you calling you spear chucker? Is that
yeah.
So that makes sense.
The mind-bogglingness when you're outside of a culture,
right?
How difficult it is to understand sometimes what's going on. So the same way that sometimes, for example, on the flip side, when I was growing up in Zimbabwe, sometimes I'll go somewhere and then people would speak to me in Shona, the language. And I had only a very rudimentary grasp of the language.
Okay.
So I'd be like, I don't speak Shona.
Yeah.
But then, given the countries past and the racial war that just happened or whatever, people sometimes thought you were pretending or trying to say you were better than them.
Oh, okay.
And trying to pretend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Oh, I'm not as black, or I'm not, I don't speak Shona, so people get offended, whatever, because to them they look at me and be like, what? And my name, was, my name is a Bob name, so if I had a teacher, they'd read my name and they'd be like, why don't you speak Shona? And the same way I come here and then adjusting, and that was baffling to me at the time.
Right.
Although now I understand where it came from.
Sure, but being
and
young.
the same way, yeah. So the same way, when I came here, I thought it would be all peace and that, like, Black Americans would be, curious to hear about Africa,
right.
But that's coming from a place where you don't understand, the sort of mental warping that's occurred in a society whereby, like, black people were, I had a lot of fist fights when I first moved here just over the fact of, like, people making fun of Africa,
Right. Well, because they don't understand it.
And they're black people, so it's baffling at first, you're like, you're making fun of me for being from Africa.
But the schools don't teach anyone about Africa.
Yeah, and obviously you have a lot of ingrained cultural shit that slavery, the history of all of those things. But when you come from outside, it's just especially baffling. Whereas to none of these people was it strange, because it was like, obviously Africa is terrible. Like, people have nappy hair. It's hot. There's animals and savages. That was odd. And so anyway, back to your question.
Sure.
Hip hop. I think hip hop and sports were big for me in terms of trying to find my own place within this culture, and also relating to my peers. Because I was a teenage boy. I wanted to have friends.
Sure.
I wanted to get along with people.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get beat up a lot anyway, so it was good to, like, have some things that you could relate to. And also, when I first moved back here, I'd heard, like, when we would come in the 80s, I would hear hip-hop and stuff, but you're a little kid, so you're just like, oh, that's a cool song,
You didn't know it was a cultural
my
movement.
Jamaican cousins would, like, they had turntables and, like, the big ghetto blasters with the 4 tape decks. My older cousins, rest in peace. And so I'd seen that, but it wasn't until I came here, and then, like, my first couple nights of being here, we stayed in PG County, and I saw, this is 1989, and I saw Do the Right Thing.
Ah, okay.
And so I was like, wow, like, I was blown away, because it was just a real introduction to not only, I read a lot, so I knew American history and racial politics and stuff, but to see, like, contemporary issues.
More like a pop culture presentation.
Yeah, and to see contemporary issues in such an incendiary movie at that time, and then also the music.
They had everyone on that soundtrack. Yeah.
So then I immediately, because PE did all of these tracks, so then I immediately got my first time I ever bought music for myself. It Takes a Nation of Millions on cassette tape at Kemp Mill Music, which went out of business before the music business even fell apart. But yeah, I bought It Takes a Nation of Millions on cassette. It had all the lyrics in there and everything, and so that was really, and from there, like, I always was into hip hop. I was always into rap. I really loved language and reading, so, like, the fact that, like, hip hop is so much about words, and
right around that era is like when hip hop really started taking, like, a kind of Afrocentric kind of twist anyway.
It already started when I came here. It had already started with that aspect. Although that appealed to me less than because I was coming from Africa, telling me about how, like,
kind of weird seeing kinds of African medallions and stuff.
Like, the idea that, like, everything in Africa was, like, I don't want to oversimplify, but a lot of those ideas were simple, and being that I was coming from Africa, whereas diaspora Africans are dealing with the idea of trying to find their identity against this, like, wave of white oppression, and trying to figure out who you are. I had already come from a place where, like, I had a black president when I was 5 years old. Like, I met him.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So it's a different experience to me, even when Obama's, it was an important experience, but it wasn't something where I never had that feeling of, like, really until I moved to America, I never had that feeling of, like, could I be president?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I knew, like, my dad knew the president, you know what I mean? So it wasn't an issue for me. So it's just very different. And so what appealed to me more, I think, was Public Enemy, because they were talking more about, like, American
Right.
stuff,
Mhm.
and the beats, man. And
Well, yeah, the Bomb Squad.
Yeah, so I was never
Killing
as
it.
big into like De La at the time. I liked them, and I would check little things.
Yeah.
But also, not growing up in New York, I learned about hip hop honestly from Rap City on
Right.
BET, which
Yeah.
would be like 4 or 5 hours. They didn't have any programming at the time,
Mhm.
and so they just have 4 or 5 hours. So if you made a rap video anywhere, it
was
would be
gonna
on,
go
on
on.
TV.
Right, yeah,
and
that's all.
and Yo MTV Raps and Friends at school, because we didn't have. We had like a urban radio station, but you know they played what was like the most popular at the
Right,
time.
right.
So you wouldn't always hear. I didn't have New York where people are gonna come up to you and be like, you know, like the first time I ever heard of Nas, I was actually in New York. I think that we had just come from Zimbabwe, or we were visiting from Zimbabwe, one of them.
Right.
And I was staying at my aunt's house, and she had a music video box.
Mhm. Oh,
And I saw
the box? Is that the
Yeah,
channel you
yeah,
you paid
yeah.
to see what you wanted?
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
choose, but then
Right,
you would
right.
see whatever was happening.
Mhm.
And I saw Nas do something where he was like, I think it was a promotion for Illmatic,
Okay.
where he was like, either talking about Rikers and walking around.
Right.
It was like you could pay to see it, and they had a video attached to it.
Hmm.
And that was the first time like I'd ever heard of dude. Like Illmatic and stuff like that just didn't really hit as big down there because it didn't have all of the New York.
Right. They kind of had their own.
Yeah,
scene
so I
there.
would really get into artists. It was almost random, you know.
Right.
Like, and so the stuff that was big at that time, I was really into Public Enemy. I got into NWA, and then more so Ice Cube. Although I was
Right.
an Eazy-E fan. Like I bought like
For the solo albums and all that?
Eazy-E's.
Yeah.
Easy Does It. I think I just had the dub joint,
Mhm.
but I bought the one after that with the Neighborhood Sniper on it. Ice Cube.
Mhm. America's Most Wanted.
Yeah. Although I came back to that record. I think it was more. I definitely liked America's Most Wanted, but I think the album where I really was like, Ice Cube is the shit. I guess it was a combination.
Yeah.
There was a few, but they would. He had a whole bunch of joints in the early '90s.
Yeah,
where,
no, he
you know,
definitely-
he would get on BET, and so that was how I was introduced to a lot of stuff. So Public Enemy was like the first group that I was like,
Sounds like one of your
100%
heavy
about.
influences. This is like something you related to right off the bat, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a big influence for sure.
Right.
And you know, just in terms of when you're like picking your favorite groups, and then there was some, you know, there were some random. It's funny because I think about some early '90s groups that I liked and how like they just disappeared into the ether. I used to like this group called Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy.
Sounds really familiar.
They only had one
Yeah.
album. It wasn't great, but I liked it for like a year. I liked it a lot.
Right.
And then that dude ended up, his name's Michael Franti. He ended
Oh,
up doing
Michael-
Spearhead.
Spearhead.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
okay. I
yeah,
didn't-
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't even-
But him and this Asian
Wow.
dude had this experimental rap group. But they would be on BET. Like
Huh.
anyone, if you could get a video, you'd be on BET.
Right.
I was really into early Tupac from like the Holler If You Hear Me video or even before that, because I like Digital Underground. Everybody liked Digital Underground.
Sure.
And then they had that one song for the some terrible horror movie with Dan Aykroyd in it,
Big Trouble? No, there's.
where they're trapped in some house with a horrible
yeah,
family.
it's,
Yeah,
Dan
yeah,
Aykroyd's the judge. And
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing but trouble.
Yes, nothing
Yeah.
but trouble.
Yeah.
So the music video for that, Tupac was in it, being carried on a litter or whatever.
Yeah, because he was the
rapping.
backup dancer.
Yeah.
Doing the
But he was rapping.
Oh, he started rapping.
That was the one where he first
Oh,
rapped
okay.
that I heard.
Right. Wow.
And I was like, oh, dude is nice. And then I really liked Apocalypse Now was a big record to me. Later on, I Wish My Brother George Was Here.
That's a great one.
That was a big record for me.
So when did you decide to start writing at the time, or were you having focus?
I used to
towards
always
that?
like write stuff down, but I never thought okay. So really, this is where I would say it all kind of, you know, coincidence comes into play, because I always looked at, again, not being in New York or anything, to me rapping was something like, you couldn't just be like, I'm gonna start rapping.
Right.
Like you could rap for fun with your friends, but like rappers were like the wall between like performance and what you could be a fan, you know. It really wasn't until I came to New York to go to college. My freshman year, I met this older girl, and then during the summer, she was like, yo, you should just come stay in Harlem with me instead of going back to D.C. So I was like, fuck it, you know, first time kind of in love or whatever.
Nice.
And so anyway, I ended up staying there for the summer, and she was from California, but she was like extreme, like she was just very political, involved in all sorts of things at the time. So anyway, she had a bunch of friends who were from the city, and she would go to like New York and Poetry Club and all of these different things. So I don't remember where along the line, but one time I came over there, and there was this kid there, and that was the first time, and she was like, this is this kid. I don't know who he was in Adams. I know, but I'm forgetting now.
Okay.
But he was one of the formative Adams family members. I didn't know any of this at the time.
Right.
At some point in the night, she got him to rhyme for me, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, it was like just a person you just meet.
Right. They're on TV or on the radio.
Not on TV or on the radio, can like rhyme like that. And it was like a style of rhyming that was new to me. I hadn't heard people rhyme. It was very erudite, for lack of a better word. And so I was like, wow, that was impressive. But then he had like stopped rhyming because feel like he had been attacked or he got his face slashed or something, so he wasn't even rhyming or something. Through them, I met Vordel, who at the time was really young. He was probably 16, 15, maybe 15. He and I always got along, man. He was a real shy kid, real bright. And she was just that girl who was real adventurous. So like she would meet somebody, you know me. I was like familiar with the hood, but at the same time I had like the feeling like don't talk, you know, mind your own business. That's how you get along. Don't get involved with people that you don't know. Where she just meet people and like be like, hey, do you want to smoke a Dutch? And they'd just be hanging out in their place. You know, Harlem was still a little bit wild back then. Anyway, at one point she was living at 139th and Edgecombe, and then that's when I really started spending more time with Vordel, and we just got to be good friends. I was just amazed at his rhyming or whatever, and he was the first person who would always encourage me to like rhyme and write rhymes when he was writing or whatever. I still was like, no way that I could record them or anything, but I was like, this is fun.
Yeah, so you started doing it for fun, and then started picking up from there, right?
Well, really what happened was, at a certain point, you know, I had become more familiar with underground because I'd been in New York for a couple of years. There was that Company Flow record came out, actually. And the funny thing is, I was introduced to that when I was at Howard University. I wasn't even in New York. And then next time I was in New York, Vordel was like, yeah, me and this kid Vast are going to do a record with LP or whatever. And I was like, I kind of thought that was like wishful thinking.
Right.
You know, and I was like, but
so
I knew that he was crazy dope, but
yeah.
I still had that barrier of like, yo, rap, like famous people like rap and like put albums out, you know? And I hadn't been around to see how much they were doing as Adams Family because I've been in DC again. And so anyway, I was headed back to DC in 2000, but in the summer before that, we spent a lot of time together. He kicked me a bunch of rhymes that were later going to end up on the Colvin, and he was like, we're just waiting for L to wrap up Little Johnny from the Hospital.
Right.
He didn't know the name of it, but that's
the project he was working on at the time.
When they told me they had an album coming out, I was like, word. And I actually made this huge effort to try and cop it in DC because I was like, Vordel kept being like, I'll just give you a copy when I see you. We didn't use the internet or anything. And I was like, nah, I'm going to get it because I was like, these guys aren't going to sell any records. You know?
You want to support.
So I was trying to support, you know?
Right.
And then the next thing I got it and I was like, yo, I can't believe this shit is real and it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's an amazing
Actually, before I even got it, I heard the gatefold that they did. LP put out that gatefold, Company Flow gatefold.
Oh,
record.
right. The kind of compilation.
Yeah. It had that song Simple on it on his joint, which is one of my favorite LP songs. And then it had like Iron Galaxy and shit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, this is crazy, you know? And so I've been writing, but like that really is what made me be like, when Vordel was like, because he always would like make me write, spit with them, but I hadn't taken it seriously, like, yo, you could actually put it out and do something dope.
Yeah. And
me and my man Thrill Gates, I was hustling in DC at the time, and I would like sit in the park all day and like write while I was waiting for, you know, custody or whatever. And with this kid Thrill Gates who come out there sometimes, we write. Really, after the Colvin came out is really when I started to be like, damn, like maybe I could actually do this, you know? And Vordel was my biggest supporter always.
What was your first segue into recording? And did you
the
record
funny
anything
thing
at
is,
that time? Or
no. The funny thing is, so I moved up here and I was writing and I moved back to New York. Vordel had been like, come up. I'm doing this album. I got my own solo deal. Come up. I came up here in 2001, notebooks full of rhymes, ready to go. I'm like, I'm ready. he was like, come to the studio session. I have the song I want to be on. He had given me the beat. We'd written, talked about the idea. So I go to the studio. It's at Electric Ladyland.
Oh, yeah?
So I'm just like,
Oh, wow.
oh my God. Like my first time recording. I'm going into Electric Ladyland. They got the Jimi Hendrix thing above the stairs. You know, I'm like, and in my mind, this was like the night that was going to be like the beginning of my ascendancy.
Sure.
You know, get in there, huge control room, breaking up weed. Ford was introducing me to everyone. I'm so amped on it all. I'm not even noticing that kind of nobody else wants me to be there. So after a little while,
it's like, who's this guy kind of?
Yeah. Like very tepid response. But I'm just wide-eyed and like excited. And Shamar is that dude who puts you at ease, you know. Vordel is that guy who just puts everyone at ease. Came time, I went in the booth. I started kicking my verse. His manager at the time, who remained nameless, and the other people are basically just like straight looking at me with the like, yeah, man, they're giving me that face, like, and then they just keep being like, do it again, no, not there, do it again, and there's no encouragement, nobody saying anything, and so I mean it was like an epic. It felt to me at the time like an epic flame out because eventually I just had to come out the booth, and they were like, nah, it's not working, and I could tell. Vordel wasn't saying that, but I could tell that he felt real embarrassed. I think that I in all honesty, I wasn't really ready.
Sure.
But they were also being complete assholes. It wasn't like I was
probably
doing
like a
nothing,
mixture
you know?
of like, you know, your first time, and then I'm sure that discomfort's kind of slowly crept in.
Happened. Oh, no, they were being, it was very clear. They were like, we want to discourage this guy and get him out of here. And I also, I wasn't really probably ready. But so Vordel was like, yo, we can do it another time, da-da-da-da-da. And then I leave the studio, and he was super apologetic, but, you know, obviously his manager and everyone else in there was like, get this guy out of here. He was like, you can still hang out, but I was like, I was dejected. So I was like, I'm going to leave. I leave out, and it's literally pouring outside.
You get the Charlie Brown moment.
Yeah, so it was literally the Charlie Brown moment. And it's funny because that night was the moment where I was like, man, this was all like a pipe dream. I should just forget about it. But then I was like, nah, man. I was like, I just need to never be in that situation again.
Yeah.
After that, I started looking for another place to record where I'd be more in control.
Right.
At the time, I had money, so I had the ability to like sort of
studios.
To get studio time and whatever. Like, I was on my grind back then, so I had paper, and so I was like, let me not put myself in that type of situation ever again, because I think that I can do this, you know?
Sure.
And Shamar called me the next day, like, yo, I'm sorry about that, dudes was being assholes, but I still want you on the record or whatever. That song ended up being Verbal Retaliation. That was the song it was meant to be. It was meant to be me, him, and Don Pacino, PR Terrorist.
Yeah.
And then in the end, it was just him and Don Pacino. And then they left it off that album for reasons I've never quite understood. But it came out years later on a Backwards project. So that situation, basically, after that, I started looking for ways to record on my own. And I ended up finding this dude through some people. I ended up finding these guys. And that combined with, I had an old friend from basically all my life. He had some money too, so me and him got together and put together the studio time.
Right.
And I met this dude who had a studio up in Westchester. So I'll get on the Metro North, go up there. The dude who owned the studio, who would later end up becoming partners in the record label.
Right.
With my other friend and
which record label?
Backwards Studios.
Backwards Studios.
That's
Right.
what it came on. So
Yeah.
later on, it all ended up becoming partners, but at that time he had an engineer that he had hired, John Woods, who also made beats under the name Dr. Monochrome, as part of a production duo very early on called Aero Taxi. And so I had the good fortune of having friends who were willing to try to bankroll me doing my album, and it was initially supposed to be a record with Vordel and with Thrill Gates.
Right.
But Thrill Gates and I kind of stopped rapping together. That's a long story in and of itself.
Did you stay down in D.C. or?
No, he was up here, but essentially something happened with the girl that.
It always comes back.
Yeah, I mean we're cool now, but I think it was Providence. He went on to a whole different career in life, and he's happy. and Vordel was supposed to be on it fully in an album. And so me and him, I was going up there myself, and he was coming up sometimes. And, you know, again, this just shows what a nice guy is, because, like, he took his time out to come and, like, work on my thing.
Yeah, that is
You know what I mean? When he's doing an album. And in so many ways, I just really owed it. I knew nothing about. So Vordel and this kid, John Woods, who was the engineer at that studio, who was like a musician, could play all instruments, made his own beats. They really, like, are the only reason that Camouflage even came out to anything, because I knew next to nothing.
Right.
About
that's
recording
that was
or
your
doing
debut,
anything.
Debut album, Camouflage?
Yeah. And so, and I was also just recording shit crazy with this kid, Bond, who I knew, who was this producer, who I knew from before he started producing. And anyway, Bond basically, and I would just work. I would go to his house and write. He'd make like 50 beats a day, and then I would just go up there and record in volume. You know, which nowadays it's nothing like that. But at the time, and I would like sleep at the studio and shit, and just be up there for the weekend. And then Vordel started having a bunch of legal problems around that time, so his participation in the record dwindled. And I, once again, was at one of those crossroads, and I was like, fuck it, man, I've been this far, go all in. So I just kept working on it, put it out kind of as guest starring with Vordel, you know, but obviously with his blessing, he was very involved, lifelong friend, closest thing maybe that I have to a brother in this world. And yeah, got it done and put it out, next to no response. I also didn't know what I was doing. Or
right, once you have a record done, it's like, yeah, where do you go?
I was like, oh, it's done. I'm just gonna mail it to Pitchfork, and it's gonna be that'll be it. And
not quite so easy.
Yeah. So
were you playing that? Did you start doing live shows and stuff after that, or were you playing out around trying to get?
Yeah, I was doing some shows in Williamsburg at the time. There was this club called Stinger. And you could burn weed up in there, and they'd have rap battles in there and shit. It was down on Grand Street, like Grand and Roebling.
Oh, right down there.
Yeah. But it was like nothing really around there then, so it was like rowdy as fuck. It was a very rowdy spot. Did some shows there. I would do shows wherever, you know, not necessarily to the greatest of responses, but I did them.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you came in strong, like really wanted to do it, but you're still probably finding your voice.
Yeah, it was a lot of learning, and it's funny though, because I was just talking to somebody the other day about Camouflage, and I'm like, there's so many things wrong with that album, but then there's so many things right because of the fact that like nobody had been like, don't do this or you can't do that.
Right.
And
sometimes the genius is in the mistakes and
the timing. You know, it's like a bunch of creative. Bond, really creative dude. Monochrome,
right.
Both creative and technically proficient. So he was actually a good engineer. He knew things to do. And then Vordel coming in and bringing, you know, the fact that he was just a much better MC than me at that point.
Right.
All of those things swirling together with the fact that like I was really hungry, man, and I had been doing a lot of stuff preceding then that had like, I had a really fatalistic outlook at the time, like I need to do this before something happens to me, or you know what I mean? Where you're like, this is like, this is like,
it's kind of like an imperative feeling, like you just
like this is something I have to do.
Yeah.
And you put everything you have emotionally and spiritually and creatively into something that will iron out a lot of the deficiencies and technical proficiency.
Sure.
So it's an interesting record.
Is that available anywhere still? Or?
Nah, it's out of print, but you can get the digital version. It was reissued a few years ago, like on its 8th year anniversary or something. Right. It was reissued, and those sold out, and I don't know if there are any plans to do another reissue.
Okay. So was that the first? What was that released on? Was that just starting it backwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first one. We did all the covers at fucking Kinko's. Shit was so expensive. Like nobody knew what they were. It was stupid shit.
Yeah. That's great. So how is Backwoods is then it's the engineer you met up with?
No, he went off.
Oh, okay.
And last I checked, he was a visual artist, and he was doing dance music. Great dude though.
Cool.
Shout outs to John Woods, Dr. Monochrome.
So how'd the label start up?
Well, me and that dude, my boy Zoo, just continued, and then the guy who owned that studio, at a certain point, John Woods went down to Philadelphia, and he would end up doing an album with Privilege, but that was like the last thing that he really was a regular participant. After that, he went more into doing his visual art, and doing like electronic dance music.
Okay.
So at that point, the guy who owned the studio, Phantom Power, had to make a decision. So he just started. He had been taking engineering classes, so he just started engineering the records himself. And that's when he was like, "Yo, I want to get in on what you guys are doing."
Yeah.
And so basically, at that point, he became a partner in the label.
Label's going good right now?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough.
I mean, it's tough. The music
tough.
industry's kind
It's
of
tough.
fucked right now.
But I like the artists that we have. I feel like we're in a better place than we ever have been, really.
Cool.
I think history got a good response. I'm really glad to be doing this interview. I never get interviewed.
Yeah, you should more often, man.
I never ever. Nobody ever asked for an interview. It's actually amazing. In my entire 10 years of rapping, this is probably the 4th interview I've done.
Really? That's a shame, man, because I feel like there's a lot to learn from people who are out there doing it. Especially there's so many people trying to do it. I mean, just getting other people's experiences, I feel like can be beneficial and helpful, informative. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I love it. I mean, any artist that I am interested, I always like to see an interview and get some inside. I love the shit I love those shits where they do the breakdowns of how an album was done.
Right.
Like, I really hope one day, like, I'm important enough that somebody
You
comes
ever read those
to
little
me.
books they have, the 33 and a third? They take like one album, and it's like a small little pocket book, and they just go through the whole process of how it was made. They did
I'd love that, though.
Yeah, they did one, like, they do all different genres, like rock and like soul, and they've had like, they did NWA's first album, Tribe Called Quest, but it's all these little books. It's pretty
the
cool.
stories
like,
in those are always awesome.
Yeah, no.
And
yeah.
honestly, I would love to, if one day Camouflage or History Will Absolve Me.
We'll talk a little
was
bit
worthy
about
of that
History Will
sort of
Absolve Me
thing.
right now, because that's a new one that just came out.
Yeah.
I had a chance to listen to it. I'm going to get more deep into it, but I listened to it all the way through a few times, and I like it a lot. And one of the things that strikes me, it's funny because you mentioned Public Enemy, too, as being like an early influence. Your stuff is, on this album at least, I haven't heard Camouflage, but this stuff's very political. And it's got an aggressive quality to it. And I only know AM Breakups made some of the beats on that. But who are the other producers you worked with?
Okay, well, Willie Green, I guess I should mention first because he kind of executive produced A&R'd. He A&R'd the project and
Sure.
really was an invaluable resource. He engineered everything. We discussed it from the ground up. He made a lot of shit happen. Without him, the album wouldn't have happened. And he did a bunch of the beats. He did the lion's share, I guess. Then I had some beats on there from my boy Marmaduke, who is somebody I know from Maryland. He did a bunch of joints. He did The Man Who Would Be King, Nigerian Email, the opening intro track, A Mis Enemigos, Cash for Gold. NASA from Uncommon Music.
Yeah, NASA.
Did a joint, Pump Up the Volume. It's actually an old beat, but NASA, he had, I knew it was a gem. I had done a little something with it, but I never really finished making that song, and so I'd always hung on to it, and I was glad I finally got to like do it justice because I love that beat.
Yeah.
And then Man Mantis did the Blue Dream beat, which was the last song added, although not the last one recorded.
Right, okay. I was going to... when you're picking the beats out for this album, they kind of all don't sound the same, but sonically have like a kind of like a similar texture. You picked them all out yourself, obviously.
Yeah, actually, we can... do you want to talk about Blue Dream first?
Yeah,
beats first, or Blue Dream specifically first?
Well, yeah, let's go into the beats, and I'll tell you.
Okay, so as far as the beats in general, on this album, it was very different in some ways from my past stuff.
Yeah.
One reason is that Bond kind of took a hiatus, so he didn't do any production on this album. After doing a bunch on Cape Verde. That was alright. So, going into it, a lot of the production on this album, I sent people samples.
Oh, okay.
And then, we discuss, especially with Willie Green. I mean, he's the best for that. Like, when I have a sample and I want to send it to somebody who's not going to tell me, I don't know how to do,
Right.
Nothing against producers who did tell me that.
Sure.
Just saying, he has a certain amount of flexibility where it's like, if I send Willie Green a sample, a beat is coming back in the mail, which is...
That's pretty, that's impressive.
That's nice,
Yeah.
because I'll pick weird stuff sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Pompeii, I love The Shining, and I was just watching The Shining, and during that intro part, I was just like, this shit is fucking great.
Is that in fact that's the Shining sample?
It's the intro.
Right. Okay.
to
I
Shining,
knew it sounded familiar.
When
I was
it's
hearing
showing
it trying to.
the long helicopter shot of the car going up the.
Yeah.
I mean, he picked different parts from different places, but I gotta send this to somebody, but it has to be that fire.
Right.
And then I was like, great. And the same way I sent him like Human Resources is like a really old song from like the 50s or even earlier than that I was at somebody's house and then they played it, their mother played it and send it to Green. You know what I mean? And then it was a combination of that and some specific things I picked out. So it was very
well, I mean, the beast.
It's kind of curated in a sense without being a completely pretentious dickhead.
It's got a pretty heavy sound to it. I mean, it's typical of a certain part of the underground style, but like it's certainly not like. I mean, it has some like electronic kind of sounding moments to it. A little more aggressive. I like that kind of music a lot, so it kind of spoke to me in that level. So I mean, like, were you purposely trying to go?
Yeah, what I was purposefully trying to do was I wanted the production to be distinctive, and I wanted it to be progressive.
Yes.
It didn't mean that. You know, I couldn't have turntables on a song because I have turntables on a song. I got there's some boom bappish kind of joints on there, but I wanted everybody. I told everyone from the jump, like I want everyone to like push the boundaries of what they're doing and whatever, and I'm willing to take, you know, or like Amis and Amigos. That one I sent to Marmaduke. That's from Creep Show.
Oh, okay.
And it's this scene with Ted Danson. Is this tennis pro who starts sleeping with this guy's wife?
Right, the beach scene?
Yeah. So then the mobster, is that Ben Gazzara?
The mobster was Leslie Nielsen from Naked Gun.
It was Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah.
Okay. And he has them both buried up to their necks and drowned. And then there's that part where he's in his mansion, he's looking on the screens.
Right, yeah.
And they're like coming for him. That's when that music is playing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You watch a lot of horror movies? Because you've already mentioned The Shining.
Yeah. I watch a lot of different stuff. But that's something from like, when I see like Creep Show on or Cat's Eye, that's from like my childhood. I'll watch them, you know what I mean?
Those were the best horror movies they made. I mean, like that era was.
Those are good. Those are good. So I heard that and I was like, actually, I heard that way earlier and was like, I need a beat for this.
Yeah.
And my man Essex Dogs, who did a track called Headband, which is not on the album, which is pertinent to mention because Warner Music Group had it taken down from YouTube.
Oh, okay.
It is not on the album, but that one samples Led Zeppelin.
They took it down for the sample?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not on the album, though.
Okay.
I'll reiterate.
Right.
I said he had it, and then he kept but he does this thing, and he'll probably hear this and he'll laugh because I'll tell him this to his face. Sometimes certain producers, they'll never finish working on a beat.
Oh, it can go.
So
forever.
you're like, do you have the beat? Yeah, but I'm not really finna, you know. And you're like, just give me the beat, man. That's how that song actually, Headband. I was like, I'm writing to it. Give it to me now.
Right. Yeah.
That's why I'm like,
some immediacy here.
That's why in that song there's a line told by White Boy, just loop it. That's why, because he was like fucking with it forever. I'm like, this shit sounds good.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need any. I don't care if all the bells and whistles aren't on. And so anyway, he had this Creep Show beat, but he had a lot of stuff going on too. So we had both seen it together, and he taped it, the sample.
Okay.
And then I got him to send me the sample, and then I sent it to Marmaduke, and Marmaduke laced it up for that joint. Or
nice.
The Man Who Would Be King. This is actually a good story.
Yeah, I like that one.
The Man Who Would Be King is this is something I think is interesting, although probably no one else will. The Man Who Will Be King is sampled from what might be my favorite Steven Spielberg movie, Empire of the Sun, which stars a child Christian Bale at like 9 years old or something, and a really young John Malkovich. I love that movie. Anyway, I loved that movie when I was a kid. I watched it so many times.
Right.
Saw it like 3 times in the theater in Zimbabwe and whatnot, and so I had always been wanting to do a song kind of addressing the ideas of colonialism, but through, you know, because you think about it, you're like, man, like if you were a white man during that certain time period, for a brief moment in time, it was like you were like a god on earth.
Yeah, they really kind
of. You
could
go anywhere and take anybody's shit, fuck anybody. Like you could be poor and just go to like Africa and come back with like a wealthy man with crazy property and all sorts of stuff, and just the mindset that underpinned all of that, and then obviously how it decayed and what ended up happening, and just sort of addressing those sorts of things. And so anyway, I had that song, and I knew Empire of the Sun, and I was like, why doesn't anyone ever sample this?
What was the vocal sample in the beginning?
It's Christian Bale singing.
Oh, okay.
There's all this choir. Oh, the vocal sample.
Yeah.
I took that from like exploitative
the movie
60s movie trailer.
Yeah, okay.
50s movie trailer.
Okay.
I forget what the name of the movie was. Mugumbo or something like that. Yeah. I love that stuff. Right?
So the actual sample on the song is young Christian Bale singing.
It's Christian Bale doing choir singing.
Okay.
And which I had to do growing up in Zimbabwe. Still a very colonial environment. We wore the ties and blazers to school and all that, and so I was related to that as a kid. So I thought that was like the ultimate irony or whatever to sample that, and then. It's a beautiful song, and then dude made it into like this horrifying beat, and
it's aggressive.
And then to use that to talk about colonialism while sampling a movie that's like about the demise of British colonialism in Asia, I just was like score.
Yeah,
and I actually it's one of those few times in my life where I feel like I tackled a topic and I like nailed exactly what I was like. I feel like
what you wanted to get across.
I conveyed like something pretty complicated.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what because I guessed that it was, because obviously I listened to it a few times. I was going to ask you if that's what it was about, because obviously you take some just poetry to it, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just directly saying.
Yeah, well, the chorus is all from Richard this is, again, it's funny, because this is the...
Do you read a lot? Are you well read? Or
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of literary kind of references that I picked up listening throughout the album.
Well, my mom is like is a writer and has a PhD in English literature. So I grew up with this stuff, or everything for it. But The Man Who Would Be King is like a song where my mom doesn't really hear my music, but like she was asking me about it, and so I was like, here, and I read her like the lyrics to that one. And then at the end of it, she was like, oh, you must assume that your listeners are very well read.
Yes.
And I was like, I guess that's why I'm not selling that many copies of these.
You're making references to Rudyard Kipling.
Well, the chorus is Rudyard Kipling's poem.
Yeah, the Man Who Would Be King, right?
No.
Did he write a story called The Man Who Would Be King?
Rudyard Kipling, all right, this may be getting too meta, but Rudyard Kipling is a character in the movie The Man Who Would Be King.
Oh, okay.
Starring Sean Connery, very young Sean Connery, and a very young Michael Caine.
Yeah.
Great, fucking awesome movie.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
It's been a long time.
Yeah. We all probably saw it when we were kids, but you should watch it. It's great. Because they go to Afghanistan.
Okay.
They're in British India, before when India is still Pakistan and India, and they desert their post as like sentries to go to this place called Nuristan, which is basically like a made-up place in Pakistan where they intend to make their fortune.
Okay.
And they end up getting there and then becoming like the people there think that they're gods, and they have this high elevated, and you see how that changes their personalities.
Right.
And then eventually it all comes to a bad end. Great fucking movie.
We'll check it out.
And so that's another level on which the whole title and everything works, because it's like that's a colonial.
Well, yeah.
Rudyard
Kipling wrote about. He was writing about.
And then Rudyard Kipling is a character
in
that movie that Sean Penn and Michael Caine's characters tell their story to.
Right.
So he's sort of the filter through which he's the narrator for the story. He meets them when they're leaving to go to this place in Afghanistan, and then when the surviving one of them returns, he tells his story to Rudyard Kipling.
Oh, wow.
So that sort of bookends and creates the whole thing of the whole movie.
Oh, that's nice.
And of course, Rudyard Kipling was like a huge colonial writer and apologist.
That's like, those fucking the British were all over the fucking place.
They controlled the whole world. So for a brief moment there, it was like, you're like a god if you were a white man from England.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Like whatever. It seemed like anything was possible within your grasp. So in that song, I just took part of Rudyard Kipling's "The White Man's Burden" and made that the chorus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And also, making a little reference to. I was trying to also make a slight reference to like Afghanistan and like whatever, because that's also the man who would be king or whatever. But, take up your burden, the savage wars of peace, fill full the mouth of famine. Bid the sickness cease. but when your goal is nearest the end, for others sought.
Right.
Watch sloth and heathen folly bring all your hopes to naught. You know what I mean? This whole idea that you're out there trying to better the lives of these like uncivilized people, and in the end they always will destroy whatever you tried to do for them.
Right, yeah.
Through their own laziness and heathen folly.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, that's the whole thing of the missionary ideals, man. It's like trying to enforce your will upon people. It's not going to work forever.
No, it isn't. Although it's funny because then at the same time, I'm only exist because of missionaries.
Yeah, that's
My father went to a mission school and it was able to come to leave the country due to like Seventh-day Adventist church that his parents were part of or whatever, even though he didn't believe in it and all of that stuff. But it's just interesting, obviously.
Well, that's kind of interesting perspective. Like, even the idea that no matter how fucked up the history of the world is, our existence in this current moment is thanks to it.
Yeah, of course.
To be here now.
Of course. Or just the irony of the fact that, I think I have a great grasp of European literature and culture and history. Mm-hmm. Like, my mother's grasp of European culture, history, and literature is greater than that of probably 98% of people of European descent in America.
Sure, yeah.
Which is, of course, hilarious.
Well, I think everyone from America, being that, like, no one's really local in America. I mean, like, everyone's family came here, like, in the 1700s at some point from somewhere else.
Sure.
So, I mean, like, even people with European histories don't know shit about European history. Even the same way, like, blacks who came from Africa have no idea about Africa.
I mean, the reasoning behind those two is different, but America is definitely the place of, like one of the things that makes it different is it's the place where you can at least imagine that reinvention is possible.
Yeah.
And in many ways it is possible.
Sure.
So yeah, so that's how we went out about doing the beats. I like a lot of them were like that. Then there were others like Breakups, and I did The Foreigner really early on. And Duck Hunt he gave to me, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, I need that.
Duck Hunt's a dope beat, yeah. And you guys made a video for that one too.
Yeah.
It was a cool
that's
video.
one of my favorite songs on the record. And then there was other just crazy shit like Nigerian Email. Just Marmaduke just made that and sent, but he'll make those bugged out joints.
Right. How'd you link up with AM Breakups?
AM Breakups, I linked up with through NASA.
Okay.
And Uncommon
that makes
Music.
sense. Yeah,
that's how I knew him. And then he had, I don't know when I wonder what the first beats I rapped over of his. It was either for one of his projects or maybe he did some remixes for a Cape Verde for Indonesia. Yeah, for Supercon.
So that comes out.
The beats. Oh, okay. So you're asking me
specifically
about Blue Dream?
Oh, yeah. Well, I like it because out of all the songs on the album, there's something a little bit different about that. And I like it because at first I was listening to it, I'm like, where's this gonna go? Like it's kind of goes where everything else seemed kind of like minor and industrial almost, like and dark. It still has like that kind of like creepy edge to it, but like it moves into a more like
it's bright.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's really kind of
like a nice ray of light.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things was definitely that that was the last song that got added to the album, and thank you, Man Mantis, for changing your mind on that. Because I'd initially recorded it, and then he didn't want to let that beat out there, because he'd already put it out on one of his, like, instrumental records.
Okay.
And so I was like, I respect that, even though I was also like, to a certain extent, as a rapper, you're like, dude, don't worry about it, man. Like, it's all good. Like, right. It's also funny because it's a song that's simultaneously about a failed relationship and or the beginning. You know what it is? Okay, so the whole concept is I saw that movie Blue Valentine. Yeah. And I was like, what an interesting idea for a movie. Just the beginning and end of a relationship. And I was like, that's cool. And then I was also like, if you smoke weed for long enough, maybe not. For a lot of people, you'll go through periods where you start to like, suddenly you'll get paranoid.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, this sucks, you know what I mean? Like now I'm like getting headaches and paranoid. Like I love weed.
Yeah, why is this happening?
Do I have to stop smoking weed? I don't want to stop smoking weed. I kind of was like, I want to make a relationship song, just the beginning and the end.
Right.
Once I heard that beat, I was like, that's what would be dope for this. And then I was like, but I can also make a weed song about quitting weed. And so then I just made both songs at the same time.
Right.
So it's a song about when I started smoking weed and fell in love with it, and then quitting weed. Although at the end, I haven't quit weed.
Right.
at the end, I'm like, even though I would still hit it.
Right, yeah.
Even after all of this shit, I would still smoke.
I like that double entendre right there.
Yeah, so then boom, so then the first verse is also about meeting this girl.
Yeah.
And like you know how it feels to fall in love in those early days when you're like, wow, like all you want to do is just chill with that person, you know what I mean? And everything is like exactly
That's
perfect.
Cool, it works both ways. Because it's like when you first start smoking, when you're young, it's like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
you're just
gonna stay with this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this again tomorrow.
Yeah, it's
like,
crazy.
You know,
and
same way with a person. You're like, I want to see you tomorrow. Like, let's, yeah. It's
and
like,
then and then later on, you could come at a certain point, and it's just like everything. The magic is all gone. You're wearing each other down. You're like fighting all the time, like
you're spending all your money on it.
You know, all of these things. So then I did that at the same time, and then the irony of it is that the woman on the hook is my very good friend and my ex.
Oh yeah.
So
wow, okay, that's a full cycle.
Yeah,
you're getting really meta on these.
Yeah,
tracks,
no, I mean, hey man, yeah, I definitely intended it to be. It's funny because in totally different ways, I made this album and Camouflage kind of coming from the same place of like, I need to make a definitive statement maybe in my life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Kind of like a way
in
to
Camouflage, I was like, yo, I've been, you know, there were nights when I was hustling and doing all types of shit where I was like, what if I just get bagged tonight?
Yeah.
And I just go do a fucking 5-year bid somewhere. Everything that I thought I was going to do or that I dreamed about just doesn't happen. You know what I mean?
It's always that chance.
Man. And I had that fear at that time. I was really into a lot of stuff where I was scared, and that propelled a lot of it. And then with this record, it was like Supercrime broke up, lost a bunch of friends through a bunch of different ways. I didn't know where my musical career was going. I didn't know where a bunch of shit was going. I was older.
Right.
You know, like some relationships had ended. And I was very much on some like, this might be it. You know what I mean? This might be it. Like, this is the album. I mean, I can probably continue to rap, but depending on how people react to this, I hadn't done a solo album in 7 years.
Right.
I had all these things that are
7-year gap.
Yeah.
This one and
the Chalice.
Oh, okay.
Because I did Camouflage, then I did the Chalice, which is an interesting story in and of itself, and then 7-year gap doing group projects, all these other things.
Right.
And so suddenly to find myself alone, I was, you know, part of me was very scared. You know, like, I've done all this, now I have to start again. I've been trying to build up this brand of this group.
Right.
Now I'm old, and I have to start again and try and do all this shit. And so it was also from a place of fear, you know what I mean?
Well, you're thinking maybe if this is your last go at it, you want to say as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, the title had a lot of meanings, and that was one of them. One of them was that I wanted this to be the record by which I would be judged, and I wanted to make a definitive statement. I don't know. I feel because on the one hand, I wanted to convey that, you know, Fidel Castro said that, but history did not absolve him at the end of the day, you know, and I wanted to convey both the power of that phrase and how ultimately empty it is.
It's kind of almost futile in the end.
Yeah. Like, But then I also wanted to be like, no, but really, like, I was nice, man. I was good at this, man. And at the end of the day, people are going to look back and my record is still going to stand and have like an intrinsic value to it.
Sure.
And like when I'm dead and, you know, as an artist, really when I got into art, that's what fascinated me about it was like immortality.
Yeah. You're leaving something of yourself behind for others.
And that's what I'm after. And I mean, you know, obviously, to one sense, you don't know if it'll happen. In the other sense, you could also say, who cares? But that is, you only got so much time here, so that's what I decided to do. So fuck it. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do, and you know, so.
But you're not giving up now.
No. And so it's just the aspect of like, yeah, you know, like this is it. This is me going extra hard. I didn't bite my tongue. I didn't try to do anything to appease anyone.
Yeah.
Like the Supercrime records came from a very, I feel great about them, and they came from a great place, and like. But it was collaborative, and as such, there were compromises, and also the theme of it was really trying to balance the dark and the humorous, you know? Because I have a dark side. I also think I'm a funny person. Like, people who kick it with me, I'm a fun I'm not, like, down in the dumps. Like, people generally think
serious
of me.
All the time.
Yeah, people generally think of me as a fun person, but yet I am, like, a serious person, too, and I think me and Privilege really wanted to balance those things, and that was part of the whole motif of having the comedy and tragedy masks and all of that. And on this album, I just was like, fuck any compromise, fuck anything. Like, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna write shit, and like I'm not gonna go back and be like, let me take this out. Maybe that's
right.
Or let me not.
Self-edit,
Yeah. Nah, I didn't
no
do
second
that
guessing.
on
Just, well, you come out pretty heavy, man, and it's fucking awesome. I've listened to it a couple times since you sent it, and I like it a lot, dude.
No, I'm glad to hear. I mean, I definitely, one of the gratifying things has been that it's been dope getting new fans, and it's also been great that there have been old fans who have been like, yo,
yeah, still on board.
this is what I was waiting, on some like, this is what I was waiting for, like, and it's another one of those things where it's almost fortuitous, like the same way for Camouflage, it's supposed to be this group project that everybody dropped out of. In the same way, it was kind of fortuitous that, like, Superchron broke up and ended because, like, I think I pushed that as far as it was gonna go. There were certain obstacles in the way that now it's like clear to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How's it? So you are getting a lot of good feedback, right?
Yeah. I still feel like there's, I always feel like there's like a resistance, especially from certain outlets. And even the feedback we got required, the help of a decently heavy-duty publicity firm.
Yeah. That's like the only way to do it now. It's unfortunately like
or you have to have. It depends. If you have the right, there's certain ways where I can see it being different, but it depends what you're doing.
Right.
If you're somebody like, I don't know, take Action Bronson for example.
Yeah.
It's like
he kind of
there's so many things about him, and also people who he's affiliated with, and people he knows, but also just about his style and what he does. Where I can see it's accessible. That doesn't mean it's easy or simple, but it's accessible. People can hear it on a surface level.
Yeah.
Even if there are other levels there, people can hear it on the surface level and be like, that's dope.
Yeah.
It's got a flow that fits into accepted norms of what's good. He's got a very engaging, funny personality that doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of, like, figuring out, and at the same time he's witty and clever. He's very witty, he's very clever, and also in ways that people could pick up on. If you're gonna decide to like do songs where one of the main hooks to realizing that something witty and clever is happening is that like it's a Rudyard Kipling poem. Right. You gotta have different. You gotta have different.
And you might be appealing to different fan base too.
It's a different process to get there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant before. I was having trouble articulating myself about the beats that you put on here. Is that you did kind of pick a little bit more of a challenging sound sonically for like if for that first surface level. If people are gonna like someone like Action Bronson, and I almost call him Charles Bronson. It's like, it is easily accessible the first time you hear it. Whether or not he goes deeper, there's different layers to everyone's music. But there's a challenging sonic sound of what you're doing.
For sure. And I think also lyrically that it's something...
it's a little denser.
It's tough for me it's tough for me in this era because I'm really not... I don't feel like my shit is made for, like, shuffle.
Right. Right,
you know what I mean?
It's like an album.
Yeah.
Start to end. I mean,
and it's really, like, sometimes I feel like you gotta be in the mode... If you're not in the mode, and it's just like, what is this even what is this about? What is, but if you're actually listening to it and you get into that world where you can absorb it, then I feel like it's something where you're going to be able to appreciate everything,
Dude, and you're doing it without compromising, like, your artistic ideas, which is awesome, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, I it definitely is not lucrative, but I am happy to be where I am. I could be a lot worse off, and I've been doing it for a while, and sometimes I'm like, think about other people who are doing it, and I'm like still here, and like, doing it bigger than I was then, so I'm happy for that. But I also feel like I've gotten a lot better. I've worked hard at getting better, and I feel like I have a lot of flexibility, like I haven't boxed myself in. I can do a lot of stuff,
Correct me if I'm wrong. You doing some more with Blockhead now?
Yeah, Blockhead and I are doing an album. I was just listening to some of the joints on the way here, actually.
How's that coming along?
I like it, man. It's definitely different, It's funny because some people were asking me, they were like, what are you going to do, like, after you do an album like this? It's like, when you go in like that, then it's like, okay. It's funny, I was talking to somebody, he wrote this thing about Danny Brown, talking about how Triple X, he's like, it's such a, like, scorched earth record that it's like, what do you follow that up with? Like, when you make an album that's like, fuck it, I'm throwing all my chips down, this is it.
Yeah.
If it fails, then fuck it, my life was a failure, and I'm putting it all out there. No pulling out all the stops. What's your next album? So
you didn't save anything for the last round.
So it's one of those things where I kind of have had that feeling or that fear of like, well, can I like? But I also was like, you gotta make. I'm a huge Spike Lee fan, for example.
Okay.
Right? Me and my friend are both big Spike Lee fans, and we were talking about this the other day. And the analogy I drew, Do the Right Thing is a great movie, right?
Really good movie.
Kind of a scorched earth type of movie. Then there's other movies in Spike Lee's catalog that I feel like aren't identified as like his great movies, but are great movies. They just came on a different wavelength. And
I like Crooklyn a lot.
Crooklyn is a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
It really is a great movie. Definitely Crooklyn is in the top 5, and I have Clockers in there.
Clockers is great.
Now, the book is different, and I love the book.
Mm-hmm.
And one time, for various other reasons, I had a conversation with some people Richard Price basically, about like, the movie's different.
Yeah.
But I feel like in changing some of the focus of the movie, Spike Lee also kind of made some different things, and it's a movie that has a lot to say about like the black family and drugs and young men, and it's not an incendiary. It's not Malcolm X.
No, yeah.
It's not Do the Right Thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And so, in approaching this movie, I don't need to top a movie.
Right.
In approaching this album,
yeah.
it's just important to be like, I don't need to top anything. I just need to have something to say.
Yeah.
And it could be something different. It doesn't have to be as life or death, but that doesn't make it any less important. Like, the minutia of our lives is just as important. So I guess. And
you seem to have a lot to say. I mean, you do have a lot to say.
He said we've been working together. It's different. It's very much like he sends me beats and I pick beats, and which I hadn't done for a while.
Right.
It had been a while since I just was like getting beats and picking which beats I wanted and rapping on them.
Right.
History Will Absolve Me didn't go like that, and that took 2 years to do.
Right.
And before that, so it's just a very different process, but I've been welcoming it. I've been trying to go about writing actual, I like to do things to make each project different.
Sure.
And so, I'm taking a whole different approach to how I'm writing my rhymes this time,
Oh, okay. Awesome.
I'm going more slow. I tend to write and, come back to stuff, whereas now I'm just, I'm going to finish each song until it's done, then move on to the next song.
That's probably good idea.
Not that it's better or worse, but just to give yourself, hopefully change the creative process will also result in some changes, a different type of record.
Yeah, it keeps you from getting stagnant.
Yeah, and also I feel like you got to challenge yourself to find ways to keep it interesting and challenge yourself to do something new and different.
No, hell yeah.
I don't want to keep making records. I don't want to make records that all the records are just the same. And somebody's like, I got this, so it's all good on the rest of these records that they're just doing.
Yeah, you don't want to be, every single, it's kind of like, I have one Necro album, I don't need to buy any other. You know what I mean? I already know what to expect.
Exactly.
It's not switching it up. You want to like Big Just, I like that because every single album is completely different, you know what I'm saying? He's really flipping it up.
Shout outs to Big Just.
Yeah, man.
I'm waiting on that Crocodile Tears, man.
You doing a remix or something? Or?
I'm waiting on it. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the Blockhead.
Yeah.
You got, so where can people cop the album?
History Will Absolve Me is on Underground Hip Hop. It's on Access Hip Hop as far as online ordering. It's on iTunes. And you can order it directly from us at backwoodsstudios.com. That's backwards with the Z, studios ending in a Z. I'm sure there'll be a link up with it. And you can get it there along with one of the t-shirts, which I designed and tend to think are pretty cool.
Awesome.
And yeah, I will keep you updated on the Blockhead record. I'm doing some other shit with my boy Elucid.
A little
EP. So he's that dude is the truth. That's one of the people who I listen to his music, and then I'm like, yo, I gotta get better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you listen to people's shit and you're like, yo, I really gotta get better. You can't start to think, oh, I'm nice and then I'm getting good. I'm looking forward to hearing that Cult Favorite record.
Yo, that's everything I've heard off that. Sounds
Yeah,
fucking awesome.
I have the distinct honor of having a guest verse on there.
Oh, awesome.
So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Real quick, I forgot to ask you, what's the deliberation between deciding not to show your face in the film?
Oh, okay, that's funny.
Yeah.
I was curious to hear it.
You're going the early Ghostface and MF Doom kind of route, right?
Early on, it was purely for practical reasons.
Okay.
Like I said, I was really scared of a lot of things from all different directions at that time, and I wish I had a team of lawyers here. I felt it best to maintain some level of plausible deniability because a lot of things were happening, and I wasn't sure if any of them would come back to bite me in the ass. I didn't really know what was going on. I was afraid, you know. And
we had like legal issues or something going on.
there were just things going. No, it was. I didn't personally have a legal issue, but things of all sorts of natures were going on around people that I knew or had associated with.
Right.
I was away from these situations now, and I was worried that I didn't want to be, you know, I didn't want to associate this with anything, and I just wanted to be gone, you know, from any previous situations. You know what I mean? I'd been somewhere else doing other things, and I wasn't there anymore, and I didn't want to have any way for anyone to be like, oh, that's that guy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And I didn't want that connected. And then it just turned into a thing that I did. And then now it also is kind of practical again. Like I'm going to Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to, it makes everyone in my family feel better about my potential safety.
Okay.
You know, I want to be able to make political statements without necessarily
it's definitely
worrying about
a
what
political
might
album.
happen. Which is not to aggrandize myself as some grand foe of the
right.
regime in power or anything even of that nature, but just to say that when one is in a place that is currently being administered with in such an ad hoc fashion, don't take anything for granted about what could or could not happen, or somebody could or could not take offense to, or not like, or know about or not know about. So on that level, and then it just became like a thing that I did, and you know, I felt like, I don't know, nobody really needs to see my grill all up in the you know, and then it was just a thing that I did, and you know, people are always like, well, you know, maybe that's holding you back, you should, but I just really don't feel like that's the issue. I mean, it holds me back in terms of sometimes with video ideas we can pursue. Okay. Then it's also a challenge to do new and different things, you know, that hopefully can rise to. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, a little bit of mystery, man. Like we live in a time where everybody knows everything, which is cool. Like I really appreciate how somebody like Lil B, you know, I'm not a fan of his music, but I appreciate how he can turn his music more into a movement about him and being
he's
around him and being just, you know, like people feel invested and involved in his personal life.
People into Lil B, the music comes as like a side note, you know what I mean? Like that's just an extension.
And that's not even to diss him, just to say that, you know, nowadays it's like everybody's in the studio. It's like, here's a thing of me recording my album. Here, you know, people involved. And I just wanted to reassess, maybe to my own detriment, but sometimes it's good to go against the grain. And I feel like I wanted to, you know, reassess a boundary between the artist and the, you know, people can. It's not like you can contact the label. I had a couple that actually came to Bushwick. They were like in New Jersey for a wedding, and they came to Bushwick specifically like to hang out with me. Like they're from like the Midwest, and like contacted the label, set it all up, and we're super excited. And I was extremely flattered. I couldn't even believe that happened. Yeah, like I'm not like standoffish. You can come to a show, I'll give you a pound, you can smoke a L.
Yeah.
But just in the aspect of like as an artist, I guess I'm just like, you know, against the grain. It's like, you don't know about my like personal life or what I'm doing today or what I look like or whatever.
It focuses people to really pay attention to the art itself.
And I feel like it gives you room to like, you know, like mystery, sometimes it gives you room to have questions, ideas, and maybe fill in the blanks yourself with things that you think. But
that's kind of what's lacking in a lot of music today is that old school enigma. You know what I mean? Like that people were larger than life back in the like when people were making music because you didn't really know anything about them.
Yeah,
you could create your own
sometimes
mythology.
now you see a dude on Twitter, complaining about some tone or just I'll like somebody's music and then I'm like looking at the shit they're writing on, and I'm like, nah, dude, now you just seem like a douchebag.
Like, how do you think people would feel back in the day if, they saw Jimi Hendrix posting pictures of his breakfast and, talking to
he's a regular dude who eats breakfast and takes a shit and whatnot? Nah, man. I mean, I got nothing against it. I'm just saying that's what I'm doing.
I see what you're
saying. What I'm saying? That's what I'm doing. That's where Billy Woods is at. Shout out to Phantom Power, Bond, Willie Green, Backwoods, AM Breakups, Marmaduke, everybody I forgot, V Mega.
Cool, man. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for the opportunity,
you feel good
man.
about this?
I really appreciate it. Yes, very much so. And,
all right, cool.
Like I said, nobody ever interviews me, so I probably spend a lot of time talking because I always have so much to say.
Dutch across the room. At first I didn't think much. Hide up in blaze, still recognize Dominican perfume. Natural Rivera, octoroon, sour candy. It was like cartoons. Pepe Le Pew. It was like time didn't move for the count of 1, 2, then we're flying. I'm hoping you don't ask wrong questions. I really don't want to start lying. In bed, not sleeping, she teasing, legs spread, mouth wet, seasonal fruit. Stuck in my head like the perfect loop. Slow burn, smoky eyes, lotion thighs. Suddenly realizing you're alive. Like one day I'm gonna die, but right now I'm alive. Smell you on my pillows, blackberry kush pillows. People nosy like, is that your girl though? I'm like, chill. Plenty other flowers I'm feeling still. Frontin' for real, like yeah, she bad, but I need that killer kill. Truth is, when she around, it's ill how words spill. But we don't have to say a thing, just let that blue sing.
From the very start, and in my heart I thought we never part. Hazy days mixed red and green, purple nights off those good
So much unsaid, we only keep it real when we joking. Not getting high, still smoking. Somewhere along the line, stopped trying and started going through the motion. That day to day got you on some happy to see you after work, here's a kiss. But by bedtime, I got a headache that just won't quit. Even worse in the morning, if it ain't this, it's that. If it ain't raining, it's pouring. Predictable and boring, plus got me annoyed. It's getting annoying, all that effort nulled and voided. Zero-sum game if you're at home scoring. Blood pressure soaring. Maybe I shouldn't blame you, but I do. Whatever, you blame me for all your shit too. Who knew? After all we've been through, come down to this whack petty shit. When we met, we was just kids, and even now that it's over, I was still hit.